You're listening to The Sisters Strain, with another round of our Care to Share series, leading to the screening of our upcoming documentary, The Coalition, on May 16th. We're going to dive a little deeper with 5 of Chatham-Kent's anti-human trafficking coalition members. Each will share about the service organization they operate here in CK, the ways in which they are seeing gender-based violence and human trafficking play out in our community, and the resources they offer survivors of these crimes. Now, a few of these ladies will have an extra bonus as they interviewed with us on topics for our other films, Unhoused, Communities in Crisis, and This Women's Work. So you'll be hearing about how their work is affected by the housing crisis and also their thoughts and experiences as women in the working world. We left that all in because extra information is always a good thing. The only way we can create lasting change is by uniting together and becoming informed. So follow along and, of course, care to share.
So my name is Shaide, or Shaide Pallister, people call me. I work as a detective constable with the Chatham-Kent Police Service, and I'm currently working in the Special Victims Unit. I joined the coalition last year as a means of just finding that connection and being able to work with a team of people who have kind of like-minded goals, similar to me, with a passion for wanting to try to help victims of human trafficking. I've been involved in the Vulnerable Persons Unit since January of 2026. And the objective of that unit is to try to take some of our specialized training and education and kind of gear that towards helping victims who have been traumatized. And it also aims to work with members of our community who are identified as being more at risk. And that can include things like age, environment, upbringing, experiences, things of that nature that could make them more vulnerable than the regular population. Examples of that, primarily my investigations, are typically child abuse, elder abuse, and human trafficking. In order to prepare for this role, I had to do a lot of specialized training to learn how to actually investigate these specific crimes, but also how to approach situations with a victim-centric, trauma-informed approach to these investigations. Some of the training I've been on would be relating to child abuse investigations. That's a 2-week-long course. All of these courses are run by the Ontario Police College, and they're provincially mandated for doing this kind of investigation. So child abuse investigations, human trafficking investigations, elder abuse investigations, sexual assault investigations, and in all of these trainings, a very common theme is that victim-centered approach, really the human approach to addressing victimization and people who have experienced trauma.
Can you tell us a little bit about why, I know you're coming into it, but obviously there has been a lot about how we speak to victims, how, victims might not always present the way you think, and then sometimes that can skew how investigations are done. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned as you're going, about why these programs are kind of being mandated now in order to help us make sure we're approaching them correctly?
Yeah, so I think especially in these investigations, it's that recognition that healing is not linear, and the trauma that people experience does impact how we remember things, how we communicate, how we are even able to show up in life. And so it's that acknowledgement of recognizing that the trauma they may have experienced may be impacting what we are seeing as investigators. And it's being able to pull from what we have learned to actually help guide people through their interviews and how to actually make them feel comfortable while also accomplishing our goal, which is, of course, to investigate crime and to understand what actually happened. So I think it's really important to really lean into, especially with these more, whether it's vulnerable persons, the victims that we're working with, or if it's the nature of the offense, typically when we're looking at like the child abuse realm, they have significant impact on the well-being of this person overall. So it's essential that we lean into that acknowledgement while also, like I said, helping and guiding them through the steps that we'll need to take.
Because I remember watching a couple of different documentaries, and that's the thing that comes up of they changed their story, or they remember something now they didn't remember at the time.
Right. And so previously, I think we've progressed in the last decade, especially in trauma-informed approaches to policing. But it's kind of that acknowledgement of just because someone might not remember something or their story might not come through in that perfect, like I said, linear progression, it's still that recognizing that trauma creates memory gaps. Like we know that the amygdala gets hijacked and people don't remember different things that happened. It's also that acknowledgement of a lot of victims carry self-blame for what happened, for either not running or not screaming or not doing something that maybe the general narrative might be perceived as, well, this is what you would do. That's just not the case. And it's a matter of educating not only ourselves, but everyone else that like fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, these are really normal things that we as investigators especially need to recognize, because we are dealing with, as much to us as their investigations, these are traumatic life events for people.
Are you aware of any, because we're talking to the coalition, they're explaining to us that there's been a rise of human trafficking in this area. Are you aware from the police lens of any stats or data on that, or what the numbers are kind of looking like in our area?
Well, for me especially, I would say that it's been consistent in our area. I think more than anything, we are progressing in our police service to be more capable of handling the influx of human trafficking that we do see. And particularly when we're talking about human trafficking, something that I hope to achieve even in being here today and discussing this is that acknowledgement of what human trafficking looks like. Because I think there is that misunderstanding out there that human trafficking looks like abductions or organized crime, and it has to be this really big, scary, unheard of thing, and that's just not the case. So when we're thinking about statistics, something that comes to mind for me is 91% of victims actually know their traffickers, and that is across the board. And that the most common type of trafficker is actually what we call a romance pimp. And I think when it comes to educating our children and our youth about what that means, it's to know that it typically, most commonly, starts with a relationship. And it starts with that love and gifts and spoiling and the feeling of belonging and feeling like you have someone that is there for you, and then it slowly turns into coercion and exploitation, amongst other things. So I think it's not so much that it's changed or it's grown, but we know more about it now, and we also have the means to actually combat it, and we're working really hard on that.
One thing I've been trying to, as we're learning, talk to I have a couple of nieces who are 16, 19, and trying to tell them it's not going to come in a big, bad, boogeyman, disgusting guy who's going to snatch you.
Yeah.
It's going to come, hopefully it doesn't, but if it came, it's going to come in a beautiful, possibly romantic partner.
Yeah, I can talk more about that for sure too. That was, so when we're talking about statistics, we don't necessarily, first of all, the tracking of these things has been incredibly difficult. Also, too, not having a dedicated unit made it that's also a challenge, right? Because we, a lot of times too, human trafficking comes in a component of another call. So whether it's a missing person or it's a sexual assault or it's a drug-related offense, we come to learn through those offenses that it is actually has a human trafficking component. So that's a really big piece too, where the tracking is incredibly difficult. We are, in moving forward, going to be focusing on pulling statistics and tracking more efficiently. But human trafficking comes with that added challenge too of we don't always get cooperation from victims. And so I genuinely do believe also that it's out there more than we realize, but our victims are not coming forward. And that is kind of baked into what human trafficking is designed to be, unfortunately, is that coercion of the victim and their complete loss of control. But yeah, so when I talk about the education piece, what I would like to see and what I'm really hopeful for is all of this information that I've just learned as a human trafficking investigator, I wish was available to everyone. And I wish it was something that we almost taught in schools and that we taught our children and especially our adolescents. Some of our signs that we're seeing too, when we have young kids getting a boyfriend who's significantly older than them. When we start to see said boyfriend spoiling and purchasing a lot of lavish goods for the young person, and it can be really confused of, oh, this person loves me because they spoil me and they gift things to me and they seem to care about me, and that turns really quickly, unfortunately, into an exploitation type of relationship where I bought you all this stuff, so now you owe me. like you should be giving me a return for what I've given you. And I think our young people don't understand, like we've discussed, that it's not just someone scooping you up off the street and now you're in a sex trade or being trafficked. It's someone that you know. It's someone who's developed a relationship of trust with you, so that when the trust starts to change, when the relationship starts to change, you don't know that that's happened. And especially the isolation piece is a really big part of that too. When we have young people, it doesn't, of course, this isn't the be all of how it looks, but if you have a young person with an older person, for example, and they start pulling away from friends and family, they start fighting with friends and family regarding that person is slowly and strategically pulling them away from all of their supports. And these are things that maybe when you're in that relationship, or when you're a young person dating for the first time, or relationships are new to you, that can look very normal, and it's certainly not. So these are the things that I hope that we can start talking about with our kids, to actually just develop that awareness that, it is out there, certainly, and it doesn't look how people think it does. It's actually just hidden among us very well. So
have you worked specifically in the area of like changing online platforms and social media, of like grooming, or
how do we protect our kids from that?
It starts with like sending things and then progresses to more.
Well, I would say especially kids reaching out and communicating with people they don't know on social platforms is a really dangerous thing. And especially when that communication starts to come to a let's meet up and get to know each other, I think that can be really dangerous. So we are a part of the Ontario Anti-Human Trafficking Strategy, which is provincial. And in that strategy, one of the things we do address are what has been done and what needs to be done. So we actually work with members of the Ontario Provincial Police who lead that strategy for us. And we look at things like ads. We look at things like what we've done in the area when it comes to like advertisements, and even that could include an online forum of education. And that's something that we are actively doing now. So definitely hopeful to see some more proactive efforts on our end, but also collaboratively, of course, like working with the coalition is a huge piece of this. I think we recognize certainly that police cannot alone solve this issue, because it extends into so many different areas of life. We all need support in tackling it. So we do work with them, and we're having a meeting very shortly here. So I'm looking forward to that, and also seeing what we can provide survivors in a form of support.
Do you think there might be work that's done more like in the schools, like going into the schools and having some conversations, or is that something you don't want?
It's not something that I would be able to decide. I think it would be excellent. I really think that human trafficking thrives in kind of being hidden and being evasive, and not having people know about it is where it succeeds. So especially with our youth, I just think it would be really empowering and almost essential to give them the knowledge to protect themselves and to maybe recognize some of the signs. We do have special constables that go within the schools, but they are on kind of like an agreed upon plan of what they are able to discuss. So yeah, it would not be up to me, but I'm hopeful to see that one day. Even if we can inspire parents, though, to start talking about it with their kids, especially their, statistically it is females that are targeted more often, though that's not always the case. But if we could start talking about it in the home and just recognizing that, like we said, it doesn't look as obvious as it can be, I think that would be really helpful.
Do you have particular ways that you're seeing human trafficking manifest differently in young women compared to young men? Because I know it happens to both, but maybe we assume young women are more targeted, like easier target. But how does it differ in your experience?
I would suggest that, well, statistically we do see it in young women more than men. There are, like I said, the cases where an unknowing female. This is where, when I bring in my specific role of vulnerable persons and I'm looking at the nature of maybe the home life, the age, if they have supports in their lives, like parental figures or adults that they trust, when I'm looking at what potentially could constitute a more vulnerable person, these are things that I'm considering in my investigation. And I would suggest that oftentimes these are the markers for potentially getting wrapped up in something more dangerous, or not having that support system in place to help steer you away from that is definitely a risk factor. When we're looking at potentially troubled youth who aren't going to school and maybe have some issues at home and like I said, don't have many of those supports, those are definitely the some of the risk factors we see for being a victim of human trafficking. And again, that's where I think the education piece just comes in so crucially to encourage kids to know what they're looking for and how to have self-preservation, how to keep themselves safe. In my experience so far, it's been primarily female victims. Yeah. And yeah.
I guess so. We heard from a friend of ours who's actually he's our editor, our sound guy.
Okay.
He has a son about 12 or 13, I think.
Yeah.
And he was telling us over Christmas, they have a very open relationship. He's involved in sports, good kid, gets good grades, all those things. And he said he was pulling away and acting really anxious, wanted to quit his sports teams. And then he found out through a Discord service he was on, he was speaking to someone he assumed was a peer. And then that person started kind of sending some photos and then, sent a photo of a bunch of money on a table. And the boy said, well, how'd you get all that money? Oh, I just sent some photos to a guy. And he never ended up he got so anxious about it because he felt weird. It came out and they resolved the issue, right? But is that more, for young women, I imagine it is a little bit more like a boyfriend that buys you things, but for young men, is that just a one-off, or is it a little bit more common that it's that kind of
I don't think I could concretely say that is a higher risk factor for young males, but I will say those online platforms are absolutely a space where someone who is looking to find a victim would go to. And so I think that's where we need to be extra mindful of the platforms that our kids are on and the chat forums they're using. It absolutely could be a place where someone could be grooming a child in order to try to lure them into whether it's a sex trade or even just sharing exploitive images, right? So we need to be really mindful about the platforms the kids are using, for sure.
If we could go back to what you're seeing when someone does decide to come forward, the apprehension towards revealing about their trafficker or information, and the apprehension towards coming forward in general. Could you tell us a little bit? People always, I think a lot of people are like, well, why wouldn't they just say something? Why wouldn't they just get help? Could you express why you're finding that apprehension to come forward and get themselves out of the situation?
Yeah. Well, this is where, when we discussed the victim-centric approaches and trauma-informed approaches, it's really essential for people to learn that the victim blaming needs to stop. A lot of times, and I can lean into some of my training, especially when I have a victim of human trafficking in that interview room with me or in the police station with me, it's essential that they know that they are in control. Because this is a person who has been dehumanized to the point of not being able to make a decision, whether that's in what to wear or what to eat. This is a person who has not been able to have control of their own life. And I think, too, especially when we look at some of the cases starting at the age of 13 or younger, this potentially is a person who's never known how to run their own life. And so when you get a trafficker who's able to control and coerce and manipulate someone to not even know what decisions are their own, it can become very confusing, right? On, first of all, thinking that that's normal. It's a normal way of life. There's also dependency on their trafficker. Well, where would I get food? Where would I live? How would I get help, right? There's fear of the trafficker, certainly, where we've seen cases where victims feel they can't because traffickers threaten their families or threaten harm on them. And I think, too, just that mindfulness of this is a person who has not been able to make decisions for themselves for such a long time. Potentially, it could be years that they've been going through this. We need to be really understanding and really allow them to be in control. So when I have a victim in this area in my interview room with me, it's completely self-led by them. And this is where we pull from that trauma-informed training to know that, whether you want to take pause, whether you want to eat, whether you want to go somewhere else, it is entirely up to them. And they very much get to run the show. I think, too, a lot of these issues for some of our victims are systemic. And some of these people have not had a structured lifestyle their entire lives. So when you're thinking too about apprehension to come forward to police, this could be a person who's never trusted police in their lives, unfortunately, through negative past experiences at home, maybe. This could be a person who has never asked for help or has never received help. It could be a person who finds comfort in, not having a structured environment and maybe living fluently is what they've only ever known. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that, unfortunately, police are not a safe place for everyone. It doesn't feel that way anyways. As much as we want to kind of fight back that narrative and welcome people to come to us and remind people that we are here to help and we do genuinely care, it's not always in someone's nature to come and ask for help. And it's not always that easy. There's not only the physical limitations of can they even get away from their trafficker, but also that threatening nature of fearing that their family will be harmed, that comfortability of lifestyle, or maybe they just have come to feel that that's a normal way of life. It's just not as black and white as why didn't they call police if they needed help. There's a lot of manipulation that goes into it too, and I would say gaslighting and making someone believe that their reality is not what it is. I would say that it's very much a mental game at that point.
Could you verify, from what I've heard from Karen or just different conversations, what I'm gathering is that oftentimes the victims will be introduced to drugs as a sort of way to keep them codependent. Are you finding that?
Yeah, absolutely. Whether that was already in their nature prior, that could be part of a lifestyle where that's something that's used against the person from the get-go. So come with me and I will help support your habit. Someone who is in the thick of addiction, who mainly looks for where they're going to get their next source of that addiction or where they're going to get food. Those are really their only two, food and shelter. Those are only their two concerns. So if you're able to offer me two or all three of those things, for someone who's spending their life trying to survive, that's something that would attract them to that person and potentially foster that connection with that person until eventually it becomes threatening and extortive, where you don't do this for me, I won't do this for you. And at that point, I think the connection's already been made and that person's already committed. And so it can either start that way, or it can start with, like we've talked about, with romance pimps, for example. If you're in a relationship with someone and you think they have your best interest at heart and they encourage you, just try this, take this, I'll do it with you, we'll be together. That dependency can certainly form, and then you've got a person now who is not only dependent in that relationship on the person, thinking that they love them and that they're their supporter, but also now dependent on a substance that this person provides to them. That really complicates things, and it's very common.
Have you found a big correlation to individuals who have found themselves in-house being very susceptible to finding themselves in these situations, or could you speak on anything that you're aware of in that?
Yeah. I would suggest that does constitute some of the vulnerabilities that I see in my work, whether it's, like we've kind of discussed, looking for shelter, looking for ways to support their habits, looking for food. These are all means of survival, and it's something that we all take for granted because it flows and comes naturally, but these are people who are very commonly fighting for their lives every day. And so when they are given that opportunity, I do feel that it can in turn result in them becoming a part of the sex trade, unfortunately. I personally have experienced in some of my cases that this is one of the underlying themes is, homelessness and drug use, unfortunately, yeah.
I want to ask something more personal, how you found yourself in this position. Is this something that was suggested to you, like maybe you should try this unit or this type of work, or do you feel this call personally? Like what guides you to want to do this work?
Yeah, so human trafficking initially to me was an area of my job and my profession that seemed very elusive. And I think I can agree with the rest of the community where it seems like it's not really there until you've experienced it. And so I've had some really eye-opening and empowering experiences in my role on Frontline, where I've been able to work with victims of human trafficking. I've kind of seen the scale of from wanting help to certainly not wanting my help. but I don't think I've ever seen more strength than with a human trafficking victim. Like I've said, this is a person who has been completely dehumanized and treated like property for what could be 10 plus years of their life. And so that really motivated me to want to understand it more. And so when I was working frontline patrol, I would put myself in situations looking at different, maybe motels and different areas that I knew it may be kind of a place where this type of crime could take place. And I found myself really being drawn to wanting to help victims of human trafficking. I also, of course, in some of my trainings have been able to hear survivor stories, and I find them just so empowering and impactful. And so I guess I really just want to help change that narrative out there for the victims that are potentially seeing this, that there are people who genuinely do care. There's life outside of the life they're currently living. I've seen it. I've seen that change. And it's just something that is very near and dear to my heart. I hope that I'm able to have some sort of impact in this realm. And also would really like to play a part in holding some abusers accountable for what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing that comes up with a lot of the women, a lot of the work that we're doing, why we feel called to do our like Boys and Men's project to be more preventative, or like how do we really shift the needle that these women are showing every day and they're doing this work, and like, but justice doesn't always get served, or so rarely gets served.
Well, and I just to throw in there as well, my relationship actually, and even my knowledge of the coalition, started with I was previously in community services, and it started with a kind of a partnership that Karen and I decided to create, where in our discussions about some of the victims they were working with, whether just whether domestic violence or human trafficking related, there's such a gap in victims being able to talk to police, but also to understand police processes, to feel comfortable. And so I would go to the shelter bi-weekly just to sit with victims and to give them the opportunity to ask questions. Not even, criminal related questions, but about our reporting, or about the information that they're entitled to, or about how an event took place for them. Because, like, as we've discussed, trauma sometimes paints a different picture or leaves certain details out. And so that victim might not even remember what happened or why that night. So it became pretty clear that we had a gap of maybe trust or communication between victims and police. And so that kind of sparked everything. And so when I learned about the Human Trafficking Coalition, plus my previous experiences with victims of human trafficking, it just felt like the right place. It just felt like an opportunity to work collaboratively with other support services. Because like I've said, we police cannot conquer this alone, nor should we, because we don't have all of the skill sets. We are a part of the puzzle, but we don't make up the whole thing. So that's what really steered me in the direction of the coalition. It's kind of about, if you're going to talk the talk, let's walk the walk, and let's make the changes. Let's show our victims that we care, not just say that we care. And so what we know is a necessity to lean into the trauma-informed approach and that really humanistic approach to appreciating what it takes for a person to come into a police station and how scary it is, especially for children, to come into a foreign place with foreign people and then talk about some of the worst things they've ever experienced in their life. We want to focus on not re-traumatizing someone and also not adding to that trauma. So when we looked at the space that we've kind of recreated to make it more welcoming and to make it more inviting, it was just a necessary change. That space previously, it was still a waiting area, but it was 4 white walls and a couch. And when you look at it now, we've just made it a little bit more homey, with a little bit more of a welcoming feeling, so that maybe when people reflect back on this time, they could at least have some positivity sprinkled throughout. It was at least an inviting place. There's now movies for kids to watch, like games to play, just to feel more welcoming and to hopefully curb that fear of coming and talking to the police, because we want people to feel comfortable talking to us. That hits on a personal level for me. I had experiences as a kid that I will never forget, the faces or the places that I was. And so when I think about the little young ones that are coming to talk to me, I hope, of course, they remember me as a positive an interactive person that was able to help guide them through some of these times, but I also want them to remember the environment and that it was not a bad memory per se. So I think it was a really great change, very well timed for all the changes that we're making right now. We didn't get into it too much, but I'll just add, like, we have seen some progressive change with Chatham-Kent Police Service. I've been here for 5 years now, and we have just added more specialized units and revamped what our units look like. So we have at least 4 specialized detectives that are trained in human trafficking specifically. 2 of us, it's our primary role, and then we have 1 in intelligence and 1 in major crimes. Major crimes is also its own brand new unit. So it's very exciting times because we're actually getting dedicated investigators to each of these crimes. And like I'd said before, it's so collaborative where we learn through our intelligence unit that there is a potential of human trafficking, and that's why it's so essential to have someone trained there so that they can pick up and either do some of the work on their end or collaboratively work with us and we can work as a team. So that's really exciting for us in a sense of doing right by these kinds of criminal acts and making sure that we're investigating them thoroughly and throwing the resources at them that they require. So that's one of our exciting changes alongside, we also do now have a soft interview room and an interview room that's meant just for kids. And the intention of those is, again, when you're looking at the trauma-informed perspective of, well, why would we have a victim or a witness to something that's potentially one of the worst things they've ever seen, the worst experience they've ever had, come and sit in what feels like an interrogation room, where they're now further made to be uncomfortable and maybe even feeling unsafe or unprotected. We want to make them feel that they can relax and feel comfortable and that it's just a conversation. That's all we're doing, and we help guide them through that. So that's where my training comes in of not just maybe leaving someone to their own devices to try to remember what happened, and I'm able to pull on some of my training to help walk someone through that process. Yeah.
You mentioned like some personal experiences you had.
Yeah.
That like you think about now. Was it personal experiences in your life that inspired you to want to be a police officer?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my uncle's a police officer, so that was kind of my first attraction to the job. But yeah, I had an experience as a child, and looking back now and learning all the things that I've learned, I can remember looking back and being in the different spaces, like I said, in the hospital and talking to a child and youth worker. And I remember still, as an 8-year-old child, how I felt. And that has been something through this whole process that has been very compelling for me. Because I remember feeling such shame and guilt and confusion, and I think it's really eye-opening that through living through that experience, even an 8-year-old child has the capacity for all of these really big feelings that are so valid and so confusing. And this is where it's my job and our job as adults who are trained in these areas to help them understand that these are normal feelings, that they're not their fault, and to help maybe lessen the blow of the impact of the trauma it's going to have on their lives. That's really a goal of mine, and I draw from that a lot. And this is one of the reasons I do really like working with children in my role. Just the capacity for their understanding and emotion, I think, is surprising, and not everyone thinks that, they're just kids. That's just not the case. And what happens to us, I'm not sure if you've heard of ACEs much throughout, like adverse childhood experiences that happen from a young age. They impact you a lot. And this is also one of the things that when we look at vulnerabilities, these could be some of them. Where did they experience drinking in the home? Did they experience fighting in the home? Did they experience separations and moving a lot? All of these things can really impact how a person functions in their day-to-day as an adult. And so I think just having all these trainings and understanding how trauma can impact a person is just so essential. And like I said, I think I was able to turn that experience from unfortunate into maybe a learning experience, and I can pull from it. So I know there's value there. But yeah, it really does inspire me and helps me in the day-to-day to want to help other kids and vulnerable people who've been through some really hard things. Yeah.
I would say we're sort of given experiences in life that
although they're uncomfortable or
Yeah.
really unfortunate, are necessary for us to take into
Right.
what we're supposed to be doing and offering.
Because
to
like
others.
sharing these stories and the power of storytelling, like if you've never been personally impacted, it's really hard for you to comprehend or understand.
Absolutely.
Like, speaking to Karen, she does the work she does because of what she experienced in her household. Speaking to Linda, she does the work she does because of what she experienced in her adulthood, right? Or Glenn, we do what we do because of what we've experienced.
Well, and I
right?
think too, it's like that ability to walk someone through potentially what they went through and the thoughts and feelings associated and how that resonates in your body, and helping someone kind of translate that is really powerful. And that's, I guess, I hope where my role comes in. Obviously, unfortunately, when people are coming to me, it's bled into the criminal realm. So that is obviously challenging, but it's something where it's so important to help someone process what they've been through and to understand maybe not why it happened, but that maybe, like we've discussed, there's a greater purpose and there's another side of life where you're past this and healed from it. And so, yeah, it means a lot to me. I really appreciate the ability to just be human. And I come across this a lot in my profession because it's a hard job and it can be taxing. And I think we all do a little bit better when we just admit that we're struggling and go through it together and lean on each other. And that's where it's my job here to be your rock when you come in that door and to help you through. And that's kind of how I hope to maybe be remembered in some of these people's stories. And it's very, I'm very passionate about this field when working with specifically the vulnerable population. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you for letting me get into that, because I really do. That's a big part of
I was like, you had said it, and then I was like, we always like, why do people do the things they do?
Yeah.
Right? Why are we passionate about what we do? Why are you passionate? Why are all these women passionate about these roles and they give their life to them? Right? Like,
Well, when you think about the coalition, right, it's like that's not for most of them, I don't know if you're like not necessarily mandated that you be there. It's a choice you've made as a human being to say, I think this could better what I'm able to do for my clients, the impact survivors, by coming together, spending extra time to go and show up here and learn from each other and work together. I think that's something we're seeing a lot across the community and the work we're doing. It is.
Yeah.
And I like to call it like mini matriarchies, right? Like I haven't been studying them, but met groups of women particularly dropping their egos and pride for the work that they do and really coming together to say, if we work together, what gaps can we bridge? How can we do better?
Work as a team. And like human trafficking, it requires a team.
Oh, I bet.
Of all the crimes. Like it's, like we've said, like the highlighted word is evasive. It's and elusive. Like it's just, it's one of those things that goes completely unrecognized sometimes, but it also has the greatest impact on victims, right? Taking away someone's right to life and to be a human, So, it's very important. I think that we're coming a really long way in our training, whether it's for our specialized units who are taking weeks away to do human trafficking specific, or just our frontline who are learning how to recognize victims, how to properly, we call it flagging, like how to properly notify when we're working with potentially a victim of human trafficking, how to notify other services nearby us that this is a potential victim. So we're making great strides in how to record and, keep track of who our victims are, who our potential suspects are. We are, as we come together as a new unit, we're working really hard at, doing better. And, it's moves and counter moves too sometimes. So learning and relearning if we have to, but I think we've come a really long way, and I've seen that from frontline and how they communicate things to me now. And I've seen from our administration how important it is to get these trainings and to do right by the victims. So, I think we're doing really well, and I'm grateful to be part of it.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Sister Strain.